I think many people are misunderstanding and think that the object of the wine is, as it itself, is prohibited. I think it's the act, right, of drinking it or do something with it. So, can the objects be prohibited and forbidden? Because usually the action or the things that we do with for example, the pork is prohibited. Can the object itself be prohibited?
The brother asked the question that the Quran says that the alcohol is prohibited, so the drinking is prohibited. Can the object be prohibited? Depending upon. In the Quran, it clearly says, in Surah Maida, chapter 5, verse number 19, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu innamal khamru wal maisuru, most certainly intoxicant is gambling. Wal anzabu wal aslamu, dedication of divination of arrows. These are Satan's handiwork. Abstain from it, that is impossible. Gambling, haram, always haram. Even alcohol per se, it is haram. Unless it is going to save your life. So there's a verse in the Quran, there are no less than 4 different places. Surah Baqarah chapter 2 verse 173, in Surah Maida chapter 5 verse number 3, in Surah Anam chapter 6 verse 145, and Surah Nahl chapter 16 verse 115, that if you unwillingly disobey God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if your life is in danger, then Allah is Rahman Rahim. So under normal circumstances, if it is banned, it is totally banned. Gambling is banned. Object, so what good do you find in gambling, tell me? Huh? Is there something like halal gambling? No. You know, you have in the Gulf country, you know, they're called Islamic beer, called non-alcoholic beer. There's nothing like non-alcoholic beer. This is to fool the audience. Because even the non-alcoholic beer have a beer, but they have less than 0.5%. According to the Food Bureau in USA, anything less than 0.5%, if you don't mention it, is accepted. But even the non-alcoholic beer, according to me, it is haram. If you have maybe 10 cans of it, you'll surely get intoxicated, depending upon your capacity. So this is the way of the Western country to misguide the Muslims, so that you get used to non-alcoholic beer, which tastes like beer. So when you go out, you don't get non-alcoholic beer, you start having beer. So what is haram unless certain things are mentioned specifically. Sometimes the full object is haram, sometimes only certain act is haram. Like being spendthrift. Allah says in the Quran that being a spendthrift is the brother of a devil. Allah says in the Quran. So, spending excessively is haram. Money per se is not haram. So, depending upon the verdict of the Quran and Sunnah, sometimes the full object is haram. Sometimes only a certain part, like spending excessively, is haram. But money per se is not haram. Hope that answers the question.